Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. This is S4A Livestream number 95. Can you believe it? And it's Wednesday, April 19, 2023. We got 50 people here in the chat at twitch.tv/socialisms4a. This is probably going to be a one-stream week. We did two streams the last 2 weeks, and I think I'm about ready to have a one-stream week. We may go back to two next week. Still have more COVID articles I want to catch up on and other things. But in any case, we got a lot of people in the chat. We have some articles we can look at if there's time for that. And yeah, so it's just kind of more of a free-form stream this week. Although sometimes they take shape as we do them. Going to read through some YouTube comments and just see what else is going on, really. So I guess with that said, let me introduce, if you're brand new here, as about 500 people are each month now. I'm a U.S. American studying Marxism, specifically anti-revisionist Marxism-Leninism. Revisionism is a concept in Marxism which means that somebody has altered or revised some of the main theses of Marx and Engels, such as, for example, the need for proletarian revolution. So a major revisionist position is revolution's not necessary, that reformism can lead to socialism. For example, there are other kinds of revisionism as well, or other major theses of Marx and Engels that can be revised and then create a revisionist position. And so over the decades of Marxism and then Marxism-Leninism, there have been different anti-revisionist currents to fight against revisionists. Lenin, of course, devoted many pages to fighting against opportunism and revisionism. Opportunism being a willingness to basically class collaboration, to join forces with class enemies, people with whom you have a fundamental conflict of interest. Sectarianism would be the opposite. That's when you won't work with people with whom you do not have a fundamental conflict of interest. But anyway, fighting against revisionism is really important because they're constantly enemies of Marxism, trying to get in, water it down, and trick people into basically fighting in ineffective ways, or just sort of siding with capitalism or whatever. So anyway, as for the channel, we're on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Twitter, Patreon, a bunch of places. I often post human-read audiobooks of socialist works, and I also organize them into playlists. I sometimes add comments to the text while I read, similar to making margin notes in a book. And I also sometimes make efforts to explain difficult concepts in the text, partly for myself, because teaching helps with learning, and partly for newer listeners who might not know some of the terms or historical references or context. I also do a weekly stream on Twitch, which we're doing right now, usually on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. GMT, and I later post the streams to YouTube. Live streams are announced on the Community tab, Mastodon, Twitter, and Patreon. If you're looking, sorry, I'm still warming up. We usually go through this at the beginning of the stream. If you're looking for a Marxist study group or organization, you might try Politsturm, Politsturm. They're an international group based in Russia, Ukraine, Armenia, and other countries. So you can study Marxism, not just with the, quote, Western left, but with an international group. Otherwise, beyond that, I encourage you to get involved in your local left, to network and become familiar with the existing parties, unions, and other groups who are engaging in class struggle in your area. This would not include, however, the Democratic Party, who are completely owned by the 1% and are not a suitable forum for ideological struggle. This, of course, also goes for the Republicans and Libertarians, which probably should go without saying, but here we are saying it anyway. So anyway, that's a quick intro to the channel. As for the audiobooks, I just want to scold everyone as usual. The stream's getting many more views than the audiobooks are. You cannot, so Marxism is not an identity. I want to make this clear. You do not identify as Marxist. Marxism is a set of analytical tools for understanding society. and then it's political positions that emerge out of that as well. But it's a set of tools and analysis that you have to learn. You can't just simply call yourself a Marxist without learning how to do Marxism. So you have to actually study the audiobooks. And every week there are significantly fewer views on the audiobooks that I post than on the streams. That kind of laziness is just not going to serve you. You need to, yes, participate in the chat and whatever we're talking about that's current events, but you have to study the history and theory behind this. Otherwise, you're going to be winging it, and then you're no better than any other, any other person, just non-Marxist pulling stuff out of their ass. So, just want to mention that. Otherwise, let's get into today's chat before we get into anything else. See what's being said in the chat. And you know what? Actually, as I'm bringing that up, I mentioned Patreon before. Let's go ahead and thank the patrons whose names are about to be on the screen. And this is slightly out of date. This is last week's patron list. My apologies. It's more current on the audiobooks, but patreon.com/socialism for all. I would do content even if nobody paid. In fact, that's pretty much the way it went for the first 2 years. But I wouldn't be able to spend so much time on it without the support. It's really, really helpful. So if you can contribute on Patreon, it could be for 1 month, it could be for 2, it could be a sustained thing. Names in green have been contributing for over 2 years. Names in yellow for over 1 year. We'll be up to our first blue name 3 years soon. Not quite there yet, though. But all of it helps. It's all encouraging. And again, I'm not independently wealthy, so this helps me to spend time on that rather than doing wage work, which, believe it or not, does not usually involve, it's hard to get a job spreading anti-revisionist communist literature and hosting discussions about it. So yeah, if you want to see that, this is the way to do it. Fund this stuff. We don't run ads. We don't do sponsorships. Trying to keep it non-commercial and viewer supported with donations. So, and when I say trying to keep it, there's really no danger of that. I'm not going to be doing ads or sponsorships or anything like that. I'm not going to try to sell you a fucking VPN service. But that said, it depends on you. So give it a think. And if you like the channel, thank me, but also thank the patrons who do help keep this thing running. All right. So credits out of the way. What's going on in the chat? About to do a pre-stream dab. Thank God work is done. Well, welcome to your post-work portion of the day, and happy to help usher you into that. So here we go. There was a mass shooting on my commute to work yesterday. Well, welcome to America. I don't even know what to say anymore. It used to be mass shootings were kind of rare. They would be big events when they happened. Now, the precedent's just been laid that this is a way that people express themselves now, and there's like almost 2 a day in the United States. It's a horrific nightmare situation, country in a prolonged civil conflict. I don't know how much longer it will go on like this before getting dramatically worse, but it seems like it's getting dramatically worse on a regular basis. Fascist U.S. Supreme Court upholds the mifepristone decision. So I saw this a while back, but I didn't see the Supreme Court updated ruling on it. Yeah, so it's typically used in combination with misoprostol to bring about a medical abortion during pregnancy and manage early miscarriage. So anyway, what specifically happened with the Supreme Court? Let's see. Oh, so the mass shooting was somebody taking shots at people on the highway. That's awful. Shot 3 people in one vehicle Wow. Other channels streaming at the same time as S4A. Well, we've been streaming at the same time for a very long time, so um, I don't know what to tell you. I would assume they're trying to cut in on the. They either don't know or they're trying to cut in on the viewership. Either way, whatever. Well, welcome to those who aren't usually able to catch these live. So, anything special going up for May Day on the channel? I don't know. I hadn't. I am like kind of going gung ho on just some readings that I've really been wanting to get to, and I'm sort of trying to muster up my discipline to like get them up every Friday, Saturday now. So I don't know if there's going to be anything special for May Day. I mean, I feel like the channel itself is sort of a tribute to, international workers' solidarity, but yeah, I nothing's coming to mind. It's like also like this year, I've done April Fool's jokes in the past, and this year I just could not have cared less about April Fool's Day. I don't know what it was. I just wasn't feeling it. No particular animosity towards it. I just wasn't in the mood. And I feel like it's kind of the same thing for May Day or like other holidays this year. Like, I just want to get the content I'm trying to do done. So I don't know. Okay, somebody plug in a song. I'll check that out. We play some music before the stream starts, so take a look at that. Let's see. I remember the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones. I didn't know they had radical messages. I think I didn't have any of their albums. I just, I heard some of the singles. Catchy. But, yeah, I mean, ska in general, I think there was a lot. We were playing some Operation Ivy a couple of weeks ago. I mean, there's definitely, any bands that were playing in a sort of real world punk scene, there tended to be some kind of social awareness and people developing politics to at least some extent, for sure. So I'm over here celebrating 420 early. Also, the union I'm in decided to go on strike tomorrow, so that's cool. Solidarity, congratulations. Went over all those Eugene Debs speeches earlier at work to get in the mood. Good. Yeah, so that kind of reminds me, we covered the French protests, and those protests were ongoing for a long time, and I think that they still are. The French government still rammed through the, quote, pension reform, the raising of the retirement age. And anyway, despite all those protests, so it seems very clear whether it's sort of protests against the government, i.e. the capitalist class as a whole, because remember, the capitalist government is the central clearinghouse of the capitalist class. That's how they express their class interests and manage the dictatorship of capital through the capitalist government. Or whether it's a protest of a particular employer or investment group that owns a workplace, whatever it is, they seem to be increasingly indifferent and just inclined to ignore people. So it seems to me like the labor movement and politics in general beyond that are going to have to get significantly more militant in this era where they're just tuning us out. So, yeah. S4A, we're starting/continuing to see the results of heavily arming and brainwashing boomers to be xenophobic and violently paranoid. And of course, that didn't start with the boomers. That's been going on a long time. What hopes and choices are there going forward? That's a very open-ended, kind of vague question. I don't know. Can you be more specific? Yeah, I definitely unplugged from Twitter for a few days. No, that was not Twitter fucking up. It's just, it kind of takes something out of you. I was talking about this a lot back in January, where I was thinking about streaming less and this and that. And so here's the thing, is like for the time that I spend doing S4A stuff, except for these streams. It's solo time. It's me reading into a microphone by myself, sometimes for hours. And when I'm in the S4A, learning about socialism, teaching about socialism headspace, it's unlike other, quote, workplaces in that, I guess there's more and more workplaces like this now, but, there aren't coworkers that you can sort of just hang around with. It's work, 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 or you're doing nothing at all. Whereas I feel like, going on Twitter or social media generally is a bit more, you can banter with people and just kind of screw around, maybe pick up some information, without sort of straining so hard for it. The problem is it's just such like a brutal environment on there that it ends up not being very fun. And so you can go on looking for some company, and it can be good for that. But it can also kind of wipe you out pretty fast. And that kind of happened last week where I did the Wednesday stream, and then I spent like way too much of the time between the end of the Wednesday stream and the start of the Thursday stream, pretty much just in anticipation of the Thursday stream. So I kind of never it was almost one long stream in my mind. So yeah, I definitely got away from it this weekend. I'm all about finding that balance, I think I've gone through enough now of like hitting the wall so hard that like the despair kicks in. I now know like when I just need to log off, and if you're able to pull the plug before you start, before it all starts getting to you, that's really important. So anyway, I've just learned to do that. So if you don't see me online sometimes, that's why I'm out touching grass somewhere. Gonna start tearing through the audiobooks on my drives to work and doing weekly water changes on my fish tanks. Well, there you go. Yeah, I get it that the streams are long, and so it might be, I understand that. But still, there's a big difference between 1,500 views and 200. So I don't think that that's YouTube doing that. I think it's been a consistent pattern since the beginning of the channel. So I appreciate the insight, but I also have been watching this thing for over 3 years now. I post a Kyle Kulinski response video, 2,000 views. I post, an audiobook, 200 views. So no, it's a pretty consistent pattern. China recently said it wants to, quote, mediate between Israel and Palestine, Camp David 2.0. I don't know, maybe they should stop building subway systems for Israel first. Might be, materially contributing to the infrastructure, enabling the occupation and apartheid would probably be an important step as well. So just a thought there. Is there a significant difference between Macron and Le Pen in terms of governing? Well, we'd be kind of guessing at Le Pen. I think it would be more overt. Both are reactionary. I do think Le Pen would be more overtly reactionary. And they would do some things differently that would confuse some people into thinking that it's somehow, quote, anti-imperialist or something like that. You look at what's happening with Russia. Russia is ruled by a counter-revolutionary regime which literally is sitting on top of the corpse of the most advanced socialist state that has ever existed on planet Earth, to our knowledge, unless there was some ancient civilization we know nothing about. But not really having any evidence for that. We have to assume that the USSR was, in fact, the most advanced socialist civilization that there was. The Russian regime is sitting on its corpse right now, and yet people are tricked into thinking that it's anti-imperialist. My guess is, a fascist Le Pen regime would be similar. And it's like how people fell for things with Trump, like, oh, he's against the system. No, he's a billionaire slumlord who put more Goldman Sachs people in his cabinet than any president ever. He just does some things that the rest of the capitalists don't like. It's a change of style. So people are, incredibly politically naive, and we got to work on that. So yeah, would there be a significant difference? I mean, it's speculative, so I don't know. But I would guess that it's the same. You'd see the same sort of contrast between the standard neoliberal Macron, and then the more overtly reactionary neo-fascist, Le Pen, just like that pattern plays out in many, many advanced capitalist countries today. I enjoyed the 3 texts by Lenin written between February and October revolutions that were mentioned in the State and Revolution audiobook. Yeah, Lenin wrote a ton in 1917. So on the Lenin playlist, we have organized those into rough chronological order. Sometimes within a year, it won't be exactly in the correct order by month, but they're basically chronological by year at least, and you can get kind of a sense of the progression of the Russian Revolution, over 20 years from listening to that. It's one way. Lenin's a primary source. You can also read historical texts that are a historical narrative incorporating, many primary and secondary sources, and then telling a more balanced story. Obviously, going to a primary source like Lenin, there's, a very specific perspective to that, but it's still interesting nonetheless. If anyone wants a good read on Eurocommunism and Ver Hoxha, Eurocommunism is anti-communism, that is one of the major Hoxha works. So we have a playlist up on the channel. The American Party of Labor is a Hoxhaist party. Not even going to get into what that is right now, but they have like 8 or 9 Hoxha texts on there. I think there's one that is entirely not on the internet at all. The other ones, I think I did 1 or 2 of them, and those are in the playlist for the APL's recommended reading list, which we have on the channel. And then I just used some computerized ones that, like Marxist-Leninist Theory and some other channels posted, but eventually I will be doing those, including Eurocommunism is anti-communism. For real, Twitter does do that to you. I got one quote, "Communism killed more people than any other ideology ever," and I was like, yep, I'm out. Yeah, sometimes you just gotta log off. You can only take so much brutal stupidity and ignorance, or even just, people sharing and criticizing bad news. Like, you can just only kind of take so much of that. And you definitely get it rapid fire with Twitter. You get a concentrated dose in a very short span of time, So it can hit you hard. The recent Stalin audiobook was informative and ended with some digs on Trotskyism. Yeah, Stalin's sort of known for that, particularly anything, between about 1924 and, the late 30s. There's going to be a lot of polemics against Trotskyism for sure. Yeah, I like those as well. I thought it was actually really funny. I don't know if people noticed the way that I ended it. But so we're talking about some questions concerning the history of Bolshevism. It's like a half an hour. It's worth your time. But it's from 1931, so this is still like half a decade away from, the major confrontations with Trotskyism. So it was still being debated and discussed at that point. But basically, Stalin was writing in to the magazine or journal that was responsible for the history of Bolshevism, and just basically tore him a new one for publishing some what he considered slander against Lenin and the Bolsheviks that was just completely unwarranted, and he thought they shouldn't have published. But he goes on, and it's sort of like very high in intensity through the entire thing. And then without sort of winding down at all at the end, it just ends with communist greetings, Stalin. But it just comes out of like completely nowhere. He's just like, and furthermore, this and that, with communist greetings, see you later. I just thought that was funny. There's also a reason I said it in that particular way, and it has to do with Drew Carey. If anyone knows what I'm talking about, guess, but otherwise it'll just remain a private joke between me, myself, and I guess Drew Carey, although he doesn't know about it. We definitely need to find a way to bring socialist unions back. The craft mentality is causing us to lose the fight. Yeah, I mean, it didn't help that Taft-Hartley effectively kind of outlawed some of the tactics of industrial unionism. But yeah, Eugene Debs in those speeches is talking about in 1905, the year of the founding of the IWW, or Wobblies Industrial Workers of the World, which was intended to be one big union of all the workers. That already at that time, over 100 years ago, trade unionism was defunct. The capitalists were already too strong, and the workers organizing in trade unions, that is, organizing by the job you do, were getting defeated, and that it was time to organize not on the specific job you do, but on the basis of the industry in which you work. So medical industry, railroad industry, education, like whatever it is, to organize, mining, agriculture, to organize by industry rather than by trade. And therefore you could get bigger strikes. Well, again, some of this was made illegal after World War II. That was socialists' thanks for participating in the Popular Front against fascism. That didn't work out that well. I mean, on the one hand, okay, we're not all speaking German in the U.S., but on the other hand, it led to basically the loss of the Cold War and many other problems. But anyway, the hell was I talking about? But as far as socialist unions, even within the more radical unions, such as the IWW, there were splits over whether to get involved with a political party or not. I think it should be clear, and as Marxist-Leninists, we obviously would advocate that we need a revolutionary party that has a presence among the labor unions, and that's a must. Most of the unions now half of them are closer to professional associations than they are like fighting unions, and then most of them are in bed with the Democratic Party, which is a 1% owned imperialist party that cannot be reformed, and it offers absolutely nothing for unionized workers. Maybe if the 1% start unionizing, the Democratic Party can do something for them. But as far as the rest of us, no. We need an independent left, away from Democrats, Republicans, and Libertarians. So, are the videos backed up on the Wayback Machine? I do not know. If you want to help archive them, submit them for archiving, go for it. Though I understand the Wayback Machine is under attack now too. Somebody was just showing me the big book publishers are trying to go after them. I don't know. Some people are just in it for the drama. Yeah, those people can get fucked because they have nothing serious to offer, For me, the audiobooks take a lot more concentration, so I make sure to listen to them when I'm walking, driving, etc. But I can't focus enough to absorb the info when I'm doing something like working. That's fair, and yeah, you shouldn't listen to them without really paying attention. So, that's true. That said, as Marxists, we have to make time to study. So yeah, we do have to make that time. But I hear you. And yeah, I know that time can be hard to come by too. But I like the Stalin audiobook you posted recently. In the book, Stalin breaks down how Lenin is being both Menshevized by saying that he wasn't a true Bolshevik until the revolution. Well, I think they were saying specifically he wasn't a true Bolshevik until the struggles against the opportunists like the Kautskyites in World War I. So like closer to 1914. And slandered in saying that he never took the centrists seriously. Yeah, basically that. And Stalin points out that it's the Trotskyists doing so and pointing out the errors they make by pointing to Lenin and the Bolshevik Party's deeds rather than just by cherry-picking his writings. Yeah, I mean, that's also what was Trotsky doing during those times as well. What did Lenin have to say about Trotsky in, say, 1914? Read Disruption of Unity under Cries for Unity. My state, North Carolina, is trying to ban all drag shows, is also trying to ban any treatment of mental illness in children related to gender dysphoria, including the depression from it. Yeah, there will be a lot of really serious consequences for that, and leave it to the old Confederacy, leave it to the old South to do that. So I don't know. This is not a good country. I don't know what else to say. We have to keep struggling as hard as we can. I don't know where this ends up in the short term, though. Republicans here, person talking about North Carolina, are straight up fascist, and people call me a liberal for saying it. Those people are idiots. They're wrong. They're wrong, and they're gaslighting you. So, yeah, anyone that says you're a liberal for saying that Republicans are fascists, you don't need to be trying to work with those people in the short term right now. I mean, obviously, have the conversation you can have, but that position is completely wrong, and I'm not sure how much headway you're going to make in the short term on somebody who can't recognize fucking Republicans as the bleeding edge of reaction. Yeah, and the Democrats are right there working with them on everything and blocking the left from stopping it. So, yeah. There was a recent Jason Unruh video on the book publisher's lawsuit against the Internet Archive. Yeah, I didn't see that. Will there be S4A merch dropping? Unlikely. Um, I mean, I don't even have a logo, so no. That's not really the point of what we're doing here. So, again, you know. Yeah, Christian right-wing fascists. People who get touchy or squeamish about calling Republicans fascists have a lot of work to do. They have really a lot of work to do on themselves. A lot. Because, there's so much confusion and so mumuch fucking ignorance. It's just nauseating. I don't know what else to say. Have I seen Vicky 1999's racist comments towards Palestinians? No. No, but then again, I don't watch that channel, so I don't know. Liberals are very gullible. They really want to believe the Democrats will deliver someday. Yeah, Democrats, they've only been existing as a party and in the White House since 1828. But I'm sure that, I don't know, maybe after 200 years, they'll start to not be for the 1%. My liberal mother recently commented that Biden is probably waiting until his second term to expand SCOTUS. I rolled internally. Why just internally? I mean, this is things people believe. I don't know. Jesus is not coming. At least we have no evidence to that effect. So you better plan. Responsible adults take care of problems themselves. They don't wait for some sort of wishful thinking fantasy to come true. Take care of problems in the real world yourself. I mean, I don't just mean yourself like rugged individualism, but I mean don't rely on supernatural forces to take care of stuff for you. If you can do it yourself, do it yourself. If it takes more than one person, then organize a group and get it done. But, this just sort of waiting around for the bourgeois system to reform itself, you're going to be waiting forever. I remember when packing the courts and making Puerto Rico a state was a real discussion being had with liberals. How about $15 minimum wage? How about all the people who co-sponsored Medicare for all? Are you getting it yet? Democrats exist to fool you. That's their only purpose. And they're there to keep the left out of the way of capital. In many Democratic Party spaces, you can't criticize Obama without greatly upsetting the rooms. This is why you should not even attempt organizing the Democratic Party. It's impossible. Bernie Sanders showed this clear as day twice. And he's not the first person to do it. And then AOC as well. We're going to cause a ruckus. Bring the ruckus. And then it's just she's down there shining Nancy Pelosi's shoes. So, it's you get into that party, the party changes you, you don't change it. So we needed to organize outside of that space. That's the point. It's completely dominated by the 1% and their money and it's not a suitable forum for ideological struggle. Yeah, I think that there are different views in Puerto Rico about statehood versus independence, and that's sort of been an ongoing thing for a while. So just so people realize, like, becoming a state is not necessarily like what everyone wants within Puerto Rico. We covered like a little bit of Puerto Rico stuff, and I have some writings from Campos that I found. I do have in the queue to do at some point. So, Supreme Court is where they send the most fascist, legal-minded capitalists. Also, I think like easily manipulated because what was that guy, the ugly guy, the rapist guy that had the big hearing. I can see him, the beer drinking guy, the alcoholic. Um, the fuck is his name? Anyway, yeah, guy with like that many things they're hanging over his head. He's gonna do whatever you want. I remember when you were talking about the pronouncing of the surname Koch. It reminds me that one of the most notorious Nazi war criminals, Erich Koch, Hitler's colonial governor of Ukraine and the Baltics and governor of East Prussia, he's quoted saying of Ukrainians the following: "We are a master race," which, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to read Nazi quotes here, but yeah, they believe themselves to be superior and more worthy than everybody. I was just getting into a conversation on Twitter about atheism, as a matter of fact. There was somebody saying, doing the like usual sort of religious fundamentalist thing where you try to just view everyone's mentality as religious in some way, and that's just not how it works. So there was a person saying atheism is an unprovable belief system, same as any religion. No, atheism is the null hypothesis. Atheism says I don't believe. So somebody making a God claim, this God or these gods exist, that's the claim. And then any random person would say, okay, before I believe that, what is your evidence for that? And then there usually isn't evidence, and you just have to take it on faith. That's sort of the cornerstone of religion. And then somebody would say, well, no, you don't have any evidence for that, so I don't believe your claim. It's just like saying that, well, any other, unfalsifiable thing, there's a God that you can never see any evidence of it, but you believe in it anyway. Well, that's a question of faith, and if you care if your beliefs are true, then that might not be, a tangle that you want to get into. But yeah, no, atheism is not a belief system at all. It's a response to a specific claim, specifically that such and such God or gods exist. And even people who believe in one particular god or a particular pantheon of gods are denialists usually of other gods. So I don't know. Anyway, I do enjoy the topic of atheism quite a bit. It is unfortunate that, like so many other things in the U.S. and in the West generally, that the new atheist movement wasn't a communist movement, because when you're talking about rationalism and science and the push for a more progressive and scientifically informed society, that you're talking about socialism. Capitalism is going to hold you back. And yeah, I don't know. And then meanwhile, you get too many communists trying to defend really backwards religious views. And I get it that, in very backwards countries, you have to work with the people that have the views that they have, but you're also trying to move them forward out of those views as quickly as you can, while, being culturally sensitive enough that you don't completely alienate them and turn them into enemies straight off. But I mean, you can read this about, Mao back in the 20s in China, going against some of the really sort of mystical, superstitious kinds of folk religion that were found out in the countryside, and how it was tied to patriarchy, and the communists' efforts to educate people away from that and to get them thinking more scientifically about why things happen or don't happen in their lives. So yeah, atheism. let's go there. Kavanaugh. Yeah, that was the guy. Kavanaugh. Yeah, there are two rapists or accused rapists on the Supreme Court. But yeah, I was thinking of the new one, Brett Kavanaugh. A little late, but on the humans just being machines thing, that's a mechanical materialist way of viewing it. Maurice Cornforth gets into that in Materialism and the Dialectical Method. Yeah. I love now I'm scrolling down to this part of the chat, and it's like Kavanaugh. There's like a million comments. I've been really enjoying Bestie Marx's content recently. I noticed them on your channel tab on YouTube and would recommend them to anyone to give a watch. The anti-green capitalism critique trio seems like a very compelling angle to radicalize baby leftists. Yeah, green capitalism is not going to cut it. It's not going to cut it. And Bestie Marx, I think that was the first few videos that they put up on their channel. Yeah, Bestie Marx is informed, and I appreciate their commentary. They have a pretty big Twitter account, like 70,000 followers, and then I think just last year they made a YouTube. So good for them. Is the line being built in Saudi Arabia a massive scam? Someone says, yes, it is. I don't even know what that is. That has not crossed my desk. As an atheist, I still leave an open question about what the fuck this whole goddamn thing is. You mean just the universe? I mean, yeah. But the fact that we don't know everything about, like, let me put it this way. A couple hundred years ago, we didn't know how to control electricity. That was a couple hundred years ago. How long have humans existed? So there's a lot we still don't understand, but eventually will understand about the world. So, let's keep some perspective. Just because we haven't explained everything does not mean, therefore, God. We discovered DNA like 70 years ago. Think of how much that explained. In fact, I was looking through a recent biology text, and we're, I think, a lot closer to explaining the origin of life than ever before, in that many of the building blocks have been demonstrated to form in, various, like, clouds of materials when bombarded with radiation from a star or other sources. So yeah, I wouldn't be super surprised if we did find the origin of life like in the next century. And that's kind of the one that most of the theists sort of cling to. And then when you get people who are just like, sunsets are beautiful, therefore God. No. That's not really how like logic or evidence works. It just doesn't support that particular claim. Anyway. Yeah, you can split hairs about agnostic atheism or Gnostic atheism. So, but again, if you just treat it as the null position, like we're not born, you want to go down that road. I think most atheists would change their mind if they saw any evidence, but by the nature of it, it's a faith-based thing. You're supposed to, in Christianity at least, you're supposed to accept the existence of God on faith. I think it's a lot simpler than that for most people of like, oh, are you a Gnostic atheist? Are you definitely sure that there's no God? People take it in context. Most people come into the world and then they encounter somebody who's talking about God. And you say, what is that? I don't know anything about God. I wasn't born with that word in my brain. What is that? And then somebody explains it. And you're like, okay, well, what's the evidence for that? And then, you're met with various things like sunsets are beautiful and so on. And then you say, okay, well, I don't really find that convincing. So, you know, until further notice, I don't accept your claim. I think that's what most people are at there. Yeah, I mean, that's common sense. Lack of perceived evidence doesn't always mean it doesn't exist. Right. That's not actually as profound as people try to make it out to be, though. Again, though, the idea is if you would like to believe things that are supported by evidence, if you care that your beliefs are true, then just say, I don't know, until there's something more convincing. I don't know, but I see no evidence for it. You know? Um, yeah, anyway. Oh my God. Got an edgy troll in here today. This is the CIA channel, they said. Pepe laugh. Cringe. Tell us how the band list is. I keep seeing a pattern of people becoming Christian as they turn fascist. Yes, I've seen that too. The percentage of Libertarians that are Christian is very high. Yes, these go hand in hand. I mean, monotheism is basically a holdover from like the feudal era. And yeah, so it's deeply steeped in reaction. Believing in Christ's teachings and Christianity are two different things. Not really. Where did you get Christ's teachings from? Can I ask you that? Do you think that discovering the origins of life on Earth could help in the search for extraterrestrial life? I don't know. I guess in what way? Um, from what little I follow of the science on that, there are many factors that seem to go into uh, making a planet hospitable to life as we know it, the type of life that we see on Earth. But I'm not sure that it's the only set of conditions under which life could exist. So I really don't know. That's kind of outside of my specialization. Michael Parenti had a good book and a few good speeches on religion, God, and his demons. Um, okay, I hadn't heard that one. I'll check that out. Oh, okay, so this is back on the date that a person was saved. There was an old guy that said he knew when Judgment Day was. He said May 21st, there will be an earthquake that will kill everyone at 6 a.m. according to their time zone. Did that happen though? Maybe it happened and we're dead now. I don't know. Of course it didn't happen and I became an atheist. Oh, so that's what you mean by you were saved. Well, congratulations. Um, yeah, there was a book. What was the name of that book? This is taking me back to my old days of kind of reading some of uh, the nut job stuff. Like when well, anyway, there was a book. Was it set in 2005? End of the World. What was the book? There was some book. It had like a picture of a flood and maybe a storm. And I mean, there's just these end of the world books all the time. What was the name of this book? It was like 101005 or something like that. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to find it. There's so much like end of the world prophecy stuff out there. All right, anyway. Where were we in the chat? I accidentally hit the reload thing. There we go. I remember back when I was like 11 in 2005 and I first told my parents that I seriously doubted the existence of a God. They gave me so much shit as if I basically said for them to go fuck themselves, they're Catholic. Well, it's just because they probably got defensive because they can't substantiate or like justify their belief in the god, so they just decided to like lash out at you instead. The thing with religion, especially in Russia and China at the time of revolution, the official state religions of Russian Orthodox Church and Confucianism were intertwined with the state. China now bringing back Confucianism. You don't want that. Confucianism is pretty organized traditionalism about people knowing their social role. It's counter-revolutionary in the extreme. What is this story? India is going to hit the wet bulb threshold this year or next year. Absolutely wild. So this is an article about prolonged and severe heat waves. This is from People's Dispatch. Monthly average temperatures in February have been the hottest since 1901. Temperatures were unusually high in western India, as much as 7 degrees Celsius higher than normal. And then freakish spells of untimely rains and hail. So, serious heat waves predicted in the 3-month period till the end of May. Also a below normal monsoon. Yeah. Yeah, we do not need cultural myths and fairy tales for our morals. You do not need to seriously believe those things. You know, we can have a morality without those things. It's not that difficult, actually. So there's a comment, religion can be a powerful organizational tool too. I don't mean it cynically. My understanding of Marx is that we build towards revolution with the concrete material conditions we exist in. That includes things like religion or cultural practice. But I don't know how viable that sort of strategy is in America, seeing even that has been corrupted by capitalism. I mean, it's a major force of reaction in the United States. So that would not seem to be that well supported from what I've seen of religion in the U.S. It's not exactly a powerful progressive force. Yeah, for a lot of people, their church experience is the only kind of community that there is. That doesn't validate religion. It sort of just speaks to the complete absence of anything else in the society. Global warming is going to make humanity start living in caves again just to get relief from the heat. Religion must have started as a way of explaining the unexplained and then as a relief for the anxiety of death. Yeah, I mean, and it's normal to wonder, things like that. Is there something after death? Well, is there something when you get hit on the head really hard and fall unconscious? If there's not then, I don't know why there would be after death. You know what I mean? Like, consciousness from a Marxist perspective is, sort of a subjective mediation of physiological processes. So, when your body dies, your consciousness goes with it because it's sort of just a visualization, if you will. I mean, it's not just purely visual, but it's just a representation internally to you of what's going on physically. And it's, all of your physiological processes projecting themselves onto the stage of your mind. But they're definitely connected. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting for people to think about, what happens after death, but why would you think anything does happen after death? It doesn't really make sense. Yeah, exactly. What do you remember before birth? Nothing, obviously. I believe that we'll remember that much after death. Yeah, I think that there's just nothing. I think because I don't see why there would be anything. Why would there be anything? I'd be happier as a mole man, to be honest. Well, I wouldn't have to read so many comments if I was a mole man, but I don't know. It depends on how good the Wi-Fi is, I guess. Or you could run a long wire down there. Somebody said that the stream is actually 9 p.m. GMT. That's not what I got out of the conversion, but I don't know where you're getting that from. I ran that twice. That's what it said. All right, anyway. Yeah, let's look at some YouTube comments here that, sometimes I just reply to these directly, but we'll see if there's anything that's worth a little bit more commentary. Somebody commenting on the Operation Gladio videos. This was sort of a rare thing emerging out of the BBC where they did a detailed documentary, three-part documentary on Operation Gladio. That was CIA and NATO terrorism in Western Europe. That was basically after World War II, what happened to the fascists and Nazis who didn't get killed. Well, some of them were organized by the CIA, OSS, then, and NATO intelligence into fascist stay-behind cells. So basically, these were groups of fascist terrorists that were brought under Western control, and then, there were networks of them throughout Western Europe, and in case of revolution or of Soviet invasion, these ardent anti-communist soldiers, aka fascists, literally left over from World War II, would be given instructions by NATO intelligence, and there were weapons caches and other things for them to, find, stash different places throughout Western Europe, and then they could form a resistance network, a fascist resistance network against revolution. So the thing is, they didn't wait for revolution, and they didn't wait for Soviet invasion. What they did was they started staging mass shootings, assassinations, kidnappings, and other things like that. Kind of makes you wonder some of the things that are going on in the U.S. today with all the mass shootings. Probably not every... Like I said at the beginning, they've kind of become just culturally normalized, where, like, people have a bad day, or, things are falling apart in their life. That's not just one bad day. But things are falling apart in their life. Here's how to express yourself. But that was at least what the fascist stay-behind networks in Europe started doing, was the mass shootings and assassinations and other kinds of terrorism, which was, of course, blamed on the left, because the whole effort was to be anti-communist and prevent social change. So a commenter said, I love how they refer to the possibility of a communist revolution as a coup. It doesn't work that way. Coup is what you do, meaning the imperialists. Seriously, it's mind-boggling how none of these people even consider that communism might be what people want. Obviously, the even Stalin regime or whatever just wants to coup their way to power. Yeah, and these are the kinds of anti-communist distortions that we have to deal with and fight back against. So, oh yeah, there's somebody apparently trying to impersonate me on Discord. I am on Discord, but I'm not the person with the weird avatar that is going as Socialism for All. I don't know. I guess the channel's gotten to the point where it's big enough to impersonate, but that's not me. Posted that on the community tab. There's a comment on an old audiobook, The War in China by Lenin from 1900. Comment is, I really appreciated this, though it's so sad. The ruling class always resorts to the same processes. No matter when or where it is in the world, the same happens today. It's no wonder that Putin derided Lenin in his February 21st, 2022, can I say numbers today? February 21st, 2022, decommunization speech 3 days before launching the war against Ukraine. Yes, and for anyone not familiar with that, Putin was saying, because both the USSR, well, Ukraine was part of the USSR, both Russia and the Ukraine had been going through 30 years of de-Sovietization, decommunization. And Ukraine was, kind of big on that. And Putin made a comment in that speech that, oh, you're interested in decommunization. Well, Russia can help you with that and show you what it really means. Meaning, what was the status of Ukraine prior to the USSR? It was part of the Russian Empire. So, let's see. Thanks. This was on the Bernie Sanders stream last week. I remember reading somewhere that the main reason why Bernie Sanders didn't push as hard as he could have is because he didn't want to become another Ralph Nader that is hated by Democrats. Well, I'm sorry. If you lack the courage to be even a Ralph Nader, you need emergency medical attention for a spinal transplant. But the commenter continued, I think it's more likely Bernie gave up being even a sockdem long ago and enjoys being a loyal sheepdog of capital. Yep. What do you think of the book Secrets of a Successful Organizer? I haven't read it. I don't know. But let me do that thing that I do, putting it on the list. Secrets of a Successful Organizer. Is this the the one the Republicans are always talking about? No, this is the new one. Alexandra Bradbury. So this is a relative of Ray Bradbury then? That's what the comment seems to imply. Yeah, I don't know. I was never that big into Ray Bradbury. More of a horror than a sci-fi reader, but yeah. I just I don't know. Well, there's elaborate reasons for that, but was Bradbury's dad, author of Fahrenheit 451, anti-communist? Yeah, I don't know. Let's see. Ray Bradbury, anti-communist. I really don't know. You do have to wonder. No, well, Ray Bradbury was investigated by the FBI during the 1950s for communist sympathies, according to The Guardian in 2012. So I don't know. But yeah, they did that to everybody because it was, McCarthyism. So all you had to do was be even like mildly critical of the U.S. and, communist sympathies. Let's see. Bernie Sanders is dumber than I thought. So glad I never read anything from him. All right. Well, oh yeah. Somebody said the hammer and sickle is Russian propaganda. No, the hammer and sickle is a symbol of the revolutionary alliance between the proletariat, that'd be the hammer, and the peasantry, the sickle. It originated in Russia because that's where the first revolution was, and the theory of the revolutionary alliance between the proletariat and the peasantry was developed and put into practice, of course with the proletariat in the lead because the peasantry would eventually cease to exist under capitalism and socialism. But it's been used around the world since that time, so no. Oh, somebody else also asked about this. Thoughts on primitivism? First of all, please just don't phrase questions in the form of thoughts on X. It's so just brusque and grating. Anyway, person continues, I used to be a Marxist, but have gravitated towards the green anarchy movement in the past few years. Were you really a Marxist? Like, what was the background? And I'm just asking because I'm trying to understand the processes by which, people claim to have accepted Marxism and then discard it in favor of, anarcho-primitivism. As they continue, essentially, I do not think that progress is real. I mean, that's a very sloganized statement, and civilization and capital H humanity are conflated. Civilization is human supremacist and inherently parasitic. There is no way to do civilization sustainably. These are assertions that you're making, and I don't know, are they true? You haven't provided evidence for them. This is, dogma that you're giving me, but I don't know. Support your statements. I'd say that my horizons broadened, and now I believe that it would be best for humans to return to how we live for 99% of our species' history. Well, I don't think you're that much of a Marxist if you don't look at the conditions that led to, first of all, us evolving into our current biological form and living the way that we did, in, pre-class society, quote, primitive communist society, hunter-gatherer society, and why we moved out of that. But anyway, how we would get there, etc., is a question mark, of course. Yeah, it would involve an enormous amount of people dying. So there's for starters. I want to do everything I can, which is bound to be very limited, to make the transition to an uncivilized world more gentle and less horrific. I find that people become primitivist were often on the left for much of their lives. Yeah, don't let despair get to you. That's probably the best thing I can tell you. P.S. I want to make a clear distinction between what I'm talking about and survivalist type stuff, which leans to the right. Well, survivalists aren't really primitivist. They've just drunk too much of the rugged individualist Kool-Aid, and they're like obsessed with just proving they can do everything themselves. Um, Combined with healthy doses of paranoia, like everyone's out to get me, maybe some antisocial tendencies, inability to like deal with other people, self-isolation, I don't know. The right may claim to be, quote, anti-modern, but actually they're hyper-modern in every way imaginable. Well, yes and no. Some of them are traditionalist in a very reactionary sense, which is not actually modern in the sense of being on the cutting edge of what progress can bring people. They actually want to dial it back several hundred years socially. Anyway, my response to this just kind of boiled down to thoughts on primitivism. Yes, don't. I don't know. I think it's that despair kicking in. A lot of the primitivists also, there are some cases, at least, of primitivists going eco-fascist in the end. And this whole thing about, the transition to an uncivilized world, more gentle and less horrific. You got another thing coming. My question to you is like, how did you end up down this gross deviation from anything that would be remotely good for anyone? I would like to know more about how that happened. What else? What else? In a year, the deprogram will probably have Vosh on. Time will tell. We were talking about the deprogram in that stream. All right, I think that the primitivism comment kind of did me in for today. Let's go back to the chat. See if I can regroup. Both the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church, along with a lot of Protestant churches, needs to be abolished. These huge churches need to be broken up. If there's going to be churches in the meantime, then they need to be relatively small by the amount of wealth that they hold. There's a lot of things that you could do there. Yeah, I mean, that's worthy of sort of a video in itself. I've seen predatory manifestations. Anyway, I'm so the religion issue to me is incredibly frustrating. I feel like every time it comes up, people regurgitate a lot of like really ignorant nonsense in defense of religion, and it makes me just fucking sick every time I read it. There's also faith organizations organizing for civil and economic rights and stuff. Yeah, but none of it has to be through a religious outlet that's probably also molesting the children, okay? On the Origin of Life, Professor Dave's debunking of James Tour, a synthetic chemist who makes creationist propaganda. I'm not familiar with either of them. Professor Dave really gets into contemporary origin of life research, which is a crossover of a dozen fields of science. It's very interesting, although he is a little bit petty with his clapbacks, though which I can understand given how much abuse and gaslighting he receives from standing up to these kinds of organizations. Yeah, I had kind of the same reaction to some of the like atheist channels that are out there at first, is like, it's a little bit nasty. Then again, after you see, even for a few hours, the kind of hate that they're dealing with from religious bigots, it's completely understandable. So yeah. That said, it can be somewhat off-putting, so you do have to keep it in check. I'm trying to read this comment. Like this existence, if there is anything, I will be there without my consent, so it wouldn't be much different from here. Can you restate that? Because I have no idea what you're trying to say. Like this existence, if anything, if there is anything, I will be there without my consent, so it wouldn't be much different from here. Do you mean like an afterlife? So that's the thing is, I used to think about this when I was a kid, is like, why am I sort of me? Like, why am I in this particular body? And I'm not. I am this particular body. It's just that this body thinks and talks. And the whole concept of myself as me is in fact an illusion. So, yeah, I mean, I'm a self-conscious biological entity, but there's nothing about that that's necessarily separate from this. I didn't exist before this body. I am this body. It literally is the exact, it's one and the same. It's just an illusion that body and mind are separate. But that illusion does a lot of, it confuses the hell out of people. And we could also learn to think and talk more clearly about that with language. But yeah, that's kind of the point. So people create life by reproducing. Or if our AI friend has their way, people create life by soldering circuit boards. But then, once you've created a living being through reproduction, it exists, it thinks, it has a survival instinct, and it's just sort of there until its biological clock runs out and it dies or it gets eaten or whatever. All of this is like super confusing to people when you start overlaying idealist stuff on top of it about the soul and like the consciousness as sort of independent from the body. If you think of it as just an extension of a living body, it just makes so much more sense. It can be a bit jarring at first if you're used to thinking in really lofty terms about consciousness and the mind and the soul and all these abstractions. But yeah, the reality is your mind is just a complex illusion generated by your body. It's real in that you can interact with it and it's a very useful thing, and it's internally self-consistent and so on. But it's not separate. And to the extent that the mind is an amazing thing, well, then the body is an even more amazing thing because the body is what generates the mind in the first place. But yeah, as far as existing without your consent, I mean, yeah, the whole concept of consent in the first place, there has to be a certain amount of physiological development and then consequently psychological maturity for things to even give, consent to stuff. So that's not definitely going to happen prior to your existence. So most likely, you don't remember anything about being you before you existed because you didn't exist. And you're probably just going to be some other organism. I mean, in other words, we all have the same fundamental experience of ourselves. We think of ourselves as me and I. We all have an ego in that sense. We all have like this self-conception that is oriented around survival and differentiating ourselves from our environment and so on. And yeah, I am me without my consent because when I was created, my consent didn't exist. Probably the exact same thing will happen again, after this body dies. Well, it's going on all the time right now. I just can't see it, So we are all separated in that particular way that we don't seem to experience each other's consciousness directly. Who knows if there will be some scientific breakthrough hundreds of years down the line that will change something that we understand about that. But at least as we know right now, consciousness is a separate thing that's tied to physiological existence. Anyway, I don't know if I'm boring the hell out of people or what, but let's continue with the comments. DSA sharing leftcom stuff, Anton Panakovic. Yeah, I mean, he's like a major, or he was like a major leftcom. So there's early stuff where Lenin agrees with Panakovic, and then later stuff where he really disagreed. Like left-wing communism and infantile disorder, I think he addresses Panakovic directly. But then one of the ones that I put up this weekend, an earlier one, he was agreeing with him. So I think it just, World War I and the question of revolution in Russia was just a major, major dividing line, and for good reason. Existence and the universe makes no sense to me. It's Kantian, I guess, but something can't come from nothing, nor can something just exist forever, so what the fuck? Yeah, it's one of those, you can have a nice Zen moment just sort of contemplating it. I know of no, really suitable answer to this question. Only that, again, we just figured out electricity a couple hundred years ago, and there's plenty of just basic, we still don't understand gravitation. So, there probably will be like watershed breakthrough if humanity lasts that long. There will be, continue to be revolutionary advances in science that completely change our understanding of what time and space even are. We're just not at that point yet. And so it's very hard to think about things where we're still missing really key information. There's probably a lot of intermediate stages of knowledge that would help understanding that question make a lot more sense. Google the Brabant killers, and it will lead you down a rabbit hole of Operation Gladio. All right. I don't know that name specifically. Let me see what comes up for that. Yeah, okay. So they cover this in the BBC documentary that's up on the channel. The Brabant killers, or the Nivelle gang in Dutch-speaking media, were responsible for a series of violent attacks that mainly occurred in the Belgian province of Brabant between 1982 and 1985. Yeah, Gladio attacks went on for a long time, years and years. And, yeah, I believe those were like mass shootings. I think one of them happened at a supermarket. Yes. They invaded a supermarket in the town of Aalst. They mostly carried pump-action shotguns. Even before they entered the store, they started shooting and killing people in the parking lot. So there you go. That's your NATO-backed fascists. And of course it's like, oh, they were acting independently, blah, blah, blah. Sure they were. The YouTube channel Our Hidden History has a lot of great videos about Operation Gladio and other NATO histories, specifically a long multi-part series, The Anti-Fascist Archives, is fantastic. Thanks. I don't think I know that channel, but I'll give it a look. Writing it down, because this is what you should do. Our Hidden History. Reading The Devil's Chessboard and the Cold War. There's too many words left out of this comment. I can't read it. Alan Dulles, the head of OSS, precursor to the CIA, who was smuggling top Nazis out of northern Italy to aid in the war against the USSR. He fully knew what he was doing. Yeah. Dulles Airport needs to be renamed. I think most of the U.S. will be renamed after the revolution. Look around you in the places where you live. How many things where you live were named after, depending on what part of the country you're in, old capitalists and maybe particularly slave owners from the 1600s, 1700s, maybe 1800s. Yeah, all that stuff's going to go. All of it. Why is somebody writing as of in the chat? Like, what are you doing? That's really weird behavior. Don't do that. And yet the Dems still hate Bernie. Yeah, for all of his prostration, for all of his my good friend Joe, Democrats still hate him. What did you gain, Bernie? He just did damage. Yeah, at least Ralph Nader had a lot more courage than Bernie did, for sure. Didn't the youngest pope ever die suddenly after looking into the Catholic Church's connection to Operation Gladio and the Rot Line? I I don't know. Did it? uh I don't know. I'll have to look that one up. Youngest pope died Gladio. Interesting. Did I ever read the Necroscope books by Brian Lumley? No, but they have great covers. Thank you for reminding me of those. That comment sounds like Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. Uh, Indeed. Yeah, anarcho-primitivism. Just skip it. Just skip it. Do anarcho-primitives think about how many people would die, especially disabled people, in the transition into this primitive society? You'd have to ask them, but it's a fair point. When people say they want to go back to the way we used to live, I want to know how far back. I think like the Anprims means Stone Age. So basically that. I'm in the middle of Black Shirts and Reds, hearing all of the things that they have lost when the USSR was destroyed and switched back to capitalism. It made me really sad to hear, and the thought that kept going through my mind was what the world could have been if they kept socialism. You are correct, Sir Daggy One. I think the same thing quite a lot. You know, for me at first, before I really got into more of the history of socialism when I was younger, I became aware first of the labor movement in the US, and it seemed like, wow, the labor movement was responsible for so many of the good things that we take for granted. You know, like not so much today in 2023, but like when I was younger, you know, it was a little bit easier to make a living and sort of, you know, have a roof over your head, easier anyway compared to now. And yeah, I mean, we were coming out of the age of social democracy then, which was capitalism's answer to socialism, of course. And you know, I thought at first it was just like the labor movement, but then when you step back further, and I did more digging, and then you see the connection between the domestic labor movement in a Western capitalist country like the U.S., you know, or France or England or whatever, and then you see the connection to the international socialist movement and the existence of the USSR. Just the existence of the USSR put enormous pressure on the capitalists to even respond to the labor movement. So you look at the way that today's left politics and labor movements are getting brushed off. They're like, what are you going to do? Have a revolution? No, you're not. You know, the USSR isn't even around anymore to like help you out, blah, blah, blah. And they're ignoring us. So, yeah, again, at first I saw the connection between increased living standards and the labor movement, and then I kept going, and it was like, oh, now I see also around the world international communism. So that was a really clarifying moment, and I agree. If they had kept going, the problem is Marxism fell into revisionism, you know, decades ago, and you know when the counter-revolution came for the USSR, there were people within the USSR who fought it, but they were kind of a minority. And it's because, you know, the Marxism in the USSR had unfortunately rotten away. So, yeah, I agree. It is sad. I'd rather not live day to day as a hunter-gatherer if I don't need to, you know. Yeah, I mean, I like hot running water as well. There's a lot of things to it. I mean, you get more free time. You know, there are certain things. But again, it depends where you live as a hunter-gatherer. You have a lot fewer options, but you do also have, more of the power principle. You're sort of like your group is making all the stuff. There's no consumerism. There's also, and so in some ways, like the social groupings can be somewhat more meaningful. You're all depending on each other for survival. That said, like when things go bad, there's somewhat fewer options for dealing with it. And anyway, I feel like Ann Prim's romanticized a lot of the things about that. When again, that's not the way to go. As socialists, we say yes, we're facing horrible conditions and alienation and dehumanization under capitalism. But the way that you're going to find antidotes to all of that stuff is in the future in socialism and communism, not in the distant past with a Stone Age era that we really can't return to. And if we do, it would be in some kind of post-apocalyptic scenario that nobody wants and will just bring like a lot of suffering. Anarcho-Primitivism just sounds like eco-fascism to me. Bet they would ally with libertarians before communists. Yeah. I mean, you could say it's the ultimate in reaction. They want to go all the way back. Not sure how anyone can deny historical progress. We have cities now. I think that what they mean is that material and technological progress gets identified with making people, as they said, capital H human, and that people who, are illiterate and innumeracy is also a thing, and sort of lack that kind of technology, that they're like seen as not, human or worthy or anything like that. So I think that they're denying more of the implications of technology on the narrative about what it means to be human and who gets recognized as human. No doubt, like people who have better technology often have tended throughout history in class society to dominate people that do not have the same, technology. But again, the answer to all this is pushing forward into socialism, not just giving up and being like, we must go back to the Stone Age. So anyway. Yeah, I'm not sure, Gengaros, about the Big Bang as you're saying it, because my understanding is also space didn't exist at that point. So anyway. Looking through the comments here. You know what? We've done a lot of aimless chat today. And, I considered not doing a stream this week. Reason is I just, like I said, kind of overdid it the last 2 weeks. And I feel like a half an hour ago would have been a great time to start pulling up articles rather than just sort of aimlessly chatting about things. That's, as people know, this is not usually the way that I do the streams. I just was not up for a real structured stream today. So I apologize. I do like to keep the quality level high, and I feel like I let it slip a bit today. But that said, I still just don't want to bring up the articles. So let's just keep aimlessly chatting for today, and it is what it is. The problem with cars is the massive amount of them. No cars at all would make no sense. People are talking about technology. We just need fewer that can carry more people. So there's kind of an easy solution to this, which is car share. Meaning you don't personally own a car, but you have a membership in a thing where you can get a car when you need one. Like there are like cities now do this. There are cars stationed around the city, and when you need a car, you just access one and you have like a certain amount of credits to access the car. So it eliminates the need for people to personally own and maintain a vehicle. That's done professionally. And, you don't have to pay to like register it and all the other stuff. But you can still access one when you need it. And then all the other times that you don't need a personal car, you can take mass transit. Again, though that requires us to develop a mass transit system. There's other things like bicycles, not suited in all weather and climates. There's also electric bicycles, like there's various things. But the trying to explain to people in the United States about like not having car as like part of your personal religion is like hard. I guess I don't understand primitivism because I don't see a future where technology is destroyed and useful tech prohibited. Well, that's the world they want, so yeah. Primitivism is a lot more than no cars. It's literally the idea of dismantling societies and systems and reverting back to hunter-gatherer times. It's more than even feudalism. They want to go back to hunter-gatherer times. Feudalism was agricultural. Can we get rid of Mount Rushmore? You bet. I mean, why would a socialist society keep that around? Let's put it that way. So if we can hunt and gather, can we still not farm? So, this gets into sort of anthropological stuff, and Marx and Engels did write about this in a lot of their early works, but I mean, I think that the transition from hunter-gatherer to agriculture was not, I mean, it was gradual and not necessarily a straight line either. So people tended to be nomadic and just sort of move where the food was season to season. Animals have their migratory patterns for the same reason. They go where the weather is favorable and where there's food and, all the things that animals need to live. I mean, birds can travel thousands of miles. It's really interesting, actually, if you look at migratory patterns for fishes, for butterflies, for birds. They can travel like thousands and thousands of miles in a year. But people would, tend to be nomadic. And then there would be various things like, how did we domesticate dogs? Well, it turns out dogs are like wolves in many cases previously, would tend to be very food motivated. Anybody who's had a dog knows that dogs are very food motivated. So, and anybody who's been camping will know that eating food by, a campsite can attract animals. Well, turns out that you can befriend certain wild animals if you feed them repeatedly, and then they may eventually trust you enough that, a relationship is formed. Maybe you put them in a pen, whatever. So domestication, kind of became a thing. Animals, while they have a lot of, well-developed instincts, are not necessarily geniuses, and can be somewhat easy to sort of trap. Depends on the animal, of course. And when I say geniuses, I mean compared to sort of human problem-solving ability. I think some of the most intelligent non-human animals like octopi and certain species of birds, like corvids, ravens and crows and things, can like reason on the level of like a 7 or 8-year-old child, something like that. But when it comes to just sheer logical power, unfortunately not a match for a big hominid brain. So yeah, I mean, it developed, and then people also realized that plants come from seeds, and you can deliberately plant these things. But still, it wasn't like worth it to them necessarily to just settle down, become completely sedentary, and live a purely agricultural life. So, it's not all one way or the other. People could be semi-nomadic, rely on a certain amount of agriculture in certain seasons, and then move on after that season, kind of thing. So anyway, there's a vast amount of anthropological literature on the transition out of hunter-gatherer society. Marx and Engels referred to it when they were writing their stuff. There's even more, many more discoveries about hunter-gatherer life and so on since that time. Yeah, to support the current levels of population, we absolutely need farms. That's not even a question. We have to deliberately plant or, raise the food that we need to support this many billions of people on the planet. Absolutely. You're not just going to stumble across all that. I'm sure there's going to be some angry Ann Prim coming in here saying that we're misrepresenting it, but it's a really, really stupid ideology, so I don't care. No, I've read like a fair amount of that. Back before I got back fully into Marxism, as I've told the story before, I was introduced to Marxism somewhat briefly, uh, in my late teens. Not really deeply enough to get in and read The State and Revolution. It was like I read the manifesto, a couple other things, a little bit about history of the Russian Revolution. It made sense. I didn't realize, though, unfortunately, how deep it went. And so I kind of got off that track way before I should have. And then as I found my way back into it, I sort of going to the left as it was, went through some anarchist stuff. And so I wound up listening to a fair amount of anarchists for a while, including anarcho-primitivists. And you know what? Even to me, there was a certain amount of thing that was appealing about it. The sort of talking about the meaning that people get out of living in, smaller social groups and things like that. But then you continue to think through it, and it's like, okay, but the hot running water, the feeding all of the people that exist in society today, the using technology beyond Stone Age technology. No, I don't think that this makes any sense. And I wonder if we can have any of those, sort of perks of, quote, primitive communist hunter-gatherer society, the lack of exploitation and so on, the everybody participating in a meaningful way to the survival of the group. I wonder if we can have some of the perks of that without the dramatic downside and limiting of options that pre-technological life has to offer. And then it's like, you know what? I just need to get back into Marx and see how deep it goes. And I'm really, really glad I did. So somebody asked the question of, how do we sort of protect hunter-gatherer society, etc. There are things we can do, says a commenter, to protect landscapes and preserve land for those who farm and hunt. We can also change the way that we urbanize so we do less harm to the environment, promote better public health, and have more efficient systems. We can do this by progressing, more efficient technology, not by going back to stone tools and no thought to how we can do those things without needless death and suffering. Socialism is all about technology getting more efficient, not less efficient, which Stone Age technology definitely less efficient. But the other thing is, as communists, we're trying to move the whole of society towards the end of class society. Now, doing that in a way that respects people's autonomy and participation in the process, but also not tolerating reaction that is, counter-revolutionary. So, introducing people to the modern options available under a socialist society and socializing them to be able to participate in that society, not excluding them or condemning them to live in substandard conditions outside of, the modern technological society that would only be reserved for certain worthy people. If it sounds like I'm describing what happened in the United States, yes, the United States is not socialist, but the idea that we have, the United States was founded on genocide, killing people, driving them off the land progressively over decades and decades. And then having a society where still American Indians are not still treated really badly and condemned to live in some of the worst conditions on the continent. And we need, in a socialist society, we would be addressing all of those conditions. And anyway, enough said. I think the point was made. I guess I keep seeing prehistory and civilization being pushed back further and further. I believe the archaeologists keep finding older and older megalithic structures which are pointing to a global civilization which existed at the end of the last ice age. I feel like we are not more advanced today than the comment kind of actually than the POs, P-E-O-E-O-S, I don't know, than the people then. I don't know about that. I don't know specifically what society you're talking about, but I don't think that the very old societies made it past the slave state. So, yes, it's true that there have been some megalithic ruins found that, moved back the date to maybe like 12,000 BC or something like that. But as far as I know, the technology was still on a very basic level. It's not like they found like modern skyscrapers and things like that. Or as another commenter points out, but did they get Pizza Hut? Yeah, there wasn't plastic. There wasn't like modern materials that we would understand. The labor movement is about the only part of U.S. history I feel like I can take any pride in. Debs for the win. Yeah, and even then you got to be careful because there's a lot of social chauvinism in the labor movement. But Debs, one of the co-founders of the IWW, to me the IWW is definitely one of the high points of U.S. labor history. They were some of the most radical. And then the CIO was, again, inspired by industrial unionist tactics, which were really pioneered on the mass scale by the IWW. So, yeah. I was watching Castaway in the Tom Hanks movie, and the opening scene is a FedEx commercial which ends in Moscow and people are tearing down a Lenin poster. Interesting. I haven't seen that movie, but is it in some ways an allegory for like the end of socialism and then we wind up like stranded on a desert island? Isolated and alone, rugged individualism. I don't know. I'll have to watch it. And Prims also don't think of the potential for humanity to help the planet stay healthy and thrive rather than just burn it down. Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, there is a lot of very destructive human industrial behavior right now. But that said, humans can also play a positive role in the ecosystem, like many other animals, eating fruit, spreading seeds. It's not entirely destructive influence. Under capitalism, it is because it's not about human need in any way. It's about profit. When humans are focused on what we need to take from the environment to live and are focused on what we're giving back to it as well and keeping it in some kind of balance so that it still exists tomorrow and next week and next month and next year and so on, then we're not so destructive. But it's the profit motive. It's capitalism that does that. It puts profits above everything else. And, again, even Dr. Seuss can point that out to you. This is how I was taught about the USSR in the late 2000s under No Child Left Behind in high school. Quote, USSR bad under evil bad Stalin, but did some good like got rid of illiteracy and women's rights and allied with us during World War II. And USSR got less bad under Khrushchev when big bad Stalin man died, but in the end communism failed because USSR collapsed. There you go. I can delete my channel now. We've got it all figured out. Unrelated, but I recently watched Prolocolt's History is Marching on YouTube for the first time. I would definitely recommend it for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. Yeah, Prolocult is linked off of the S4A channels tab. If you click channels, they do good work and are Marxist. I would love for us to get away from being so dependent on cars here. Cars are crap. Yeah, I mean, cars are useful once in a while, but the whole idea that everyone should own one or two or three of them is, first of all, massively contributing to climate change, and it's unnecessary. Again, car share programs, but it became this symbol of the middle class, is like you own cars. Never mind that it was actually, socially mandated by the social engineering that the car and gasoline companies were doing to make sure that the U.S. transportation system was roads and highways. But forgetting all of that for a minute, it became this symbol of like, oh, I've made it. We have cars and pickup trucks and I can drive myself around and all of that stuff. And then, that was, of course, when gas still cost like a nickel a gallon. But, here we are today in a world with over 7 billion people, and it's not feasible for everyone to have a car, even an electric car. They also have massive environmental consequences. So, mass transit and then car share for those times where you just really need to go somewhere in particular. It could work. So, primitivism is so far removed from reality, it's not even worth talking about. I know. And, I think that was probably the first time in over 3 years of running the channel that it even came up. But it came up and, you know, got it done. We did it. A robust modern-day public transport system would be amazing and better for the environment as well, absolutely. When it comes to libertarianism or other retrogressive forms of a society, like primitivism or anarchism, what's to prevent all the failings of society to repeat themselves? To me, that's the appeal of what we're doing here. Yeah, I mean, you go back to an earlier stage of society, it's going to be temporary. You're going to wind right back up here again. But really, all of these things are just other faces of fascism, like libertarianism. You know, they basically tell you that, because it's heavily anti-communist, they tell you that socialism and communism are off the table, forget about it. The most humanity can aspire to, rather, per the libertarian vision, is just the most free capitalism possible. And so they make enemies of the monopoly capitalists because, they have these illusions that they can go back to just early stage capitalism, whereas the Wild West and just all these petty bourgeois individuals getting rich, the American dream and all that, we have passed that stage of capitalism. And there's only one place to go. It's either let capitalism keep turning deeper and deeper into more vicious forms of fascism and lead us into complete ecological collapse and everything else, which is the future of capitalism without revolution. Or we have a social revolution. We take production, industry, government out of the hands of capitalists, and we run it for ourselves, not for profit, but to meet human need. And then we have a future. It was in that Maurice Cornforth book that I put up on the channel a few weeks ago. Socialism is inevitable does not mean it's definitely going to happen. It means that if there's going to be a future for the human species, it's only under socialism. Most of the West is built on libertarian values. I mean, it's libertarianism today, classical liberalism, it was bourgeois revolutionary ideology, fitting in the 18th century, not fitting in the 21st. So I don't think it's fair to say that that ideology is retrogressive. It is. It's from several centuries ago. Society is no longer emerging industrialization out of an agrarian feudal population. That was what classical liberalism, aka libertarianism, bourgeois revolution. That's the historical context, the stage of historical development that came out of. So yeah, it's absolutely reactionary and retrogressive compared to today, where the population is industrial, proletarian. We just don't live in that world anymore. You don't need a bourgeois revolution. It already happened centuries ago. Capital is already liberated. So more freedom for capital at this point means more freedom for our oppressors. They don't need more freedom. We do. Yeah, I mean, people who want to get rid of the capitalist state, first of all, capitalists can never completely get rid of the state. It's their instrument of their class rule and how they settle all the differences between themselves. At most, they want to privatize portions of it. They can't get rid of it. Who's going to enforce their private property? I do wish that more people would turn their lawns into little gardens that could provide a lot of good food and many other things. Look up permaculture. P-E-R-M-A culture. Permaculture. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there. It's not like I guess there's some people that kind of take it as a movement. It's more just techniques. It's, like the food not lawns people, sort of a play on food not bombs, but food not lawns. Yeah, don't just plant tons of fucking grass that, it holds the soil together, but it provides no food value and just soaks up like a huge amount of water. You can do other things, creating ecosystems that are not just fucking grass. Not to say that there's anything especially wrong with grass, but we could be doing a lot of other things instead. There's some really interesting stuff coming out of permaculture. We have to do something about the planned obsolescence in the automotive industry. Yeah, well, it's just done to sell more cars. So, I mean, in socialism, there would not be that incentive to make planned obsolescence. Look at Cuba. Um, quite the opposite. They have to like make the cars that they have last forever. And yeah, again, that would make, the car sharing like that much more efficient. Then the cars that you do have aren't falling apart every 5 to 10 years. Okay, there's somebody who's a little bit confused about the nature of the state in relation to Marxism and capitalism. So let me just try to clarify here. So the state emerges out of class society as an instrument of whoever is the ruling class at a particular time. Different ruling classes bring with them a different type of state. So this is addressed thoroughly in Lenin's The State and Revolution. I highly recommend it. Probably if Western leftists are going to read one single text, that would be the one I would point you to. It will just answer so many of your questions. So the difference between, okay, on the broad left, sometimes it's said that there are social democrats, anarchists, and Marxists. Here's the difference in relation to the state in very brief form. So currently, we live in bourgeois society, characterized by the exchange of commodities, ruled by the capitalist class. The population is proletarianized and then forced to work through the commodification of essentials so that the capitalists can extract surplus value from us and get richer. Okay. To do this, they've set up the capitalist state, which overthrew the feudalist state, which existed a few hundred years prior. When the proletariat comes to power, this will be the last stage of class society before classes are abolished entirely. And the proletariat sets up a proletarian state to do that. So libertarians, they are idealists who think that they can have capitalism without the state. They can't. Those who realize that end up becoming, quote, minarchists. What does that mean? They're just against social democracy. They're against public programs. They're against workers' rights, and so on. And they want to privatize as many functions of the state that they actually need to keep capitalism running as profitable. So they just want to carve it up for profit, but that's not abolishing the state. It's just running it on a different basis and essentially having a different fee structure out of the state. Anarchists, in relation to the capitalist state, want to abolish it and then replace it with nothing. This does not work because if you were to do that, the bourgeoisie would just set up a new state again. All right. Marxists want to abolish the bourgeois state and set up a proletarian state to enforce our class rule, which would involve proletarianizing the bourgeoisie and any other classes that haven't been proletarianized. When everyone is proletarianized, then class has been abolished, and the state is theorized at that point to just move away from anything managing people or waging class struggle, because the class struggle will be over roughly at that point. You might have to keep it around for a while to keep classes from reemerging, but it would transition, it is theorized, more into managing industry than people. All right, and then social democrats, they look at the capitalist state and think that we can just take the capitalist state and make it do what we want. So in contrast to anarchists and Marxists who see the need to abolish the bourgeois state, social democrats say, no, we can just change it. So it's a little more complicated than you were saying. There's this Project Camp with a K YouTube channel. There's like a bunch of rich work from home people that bought cheap land in Portugal and kind of give big anarchist vibes. It's not primitivist, but it's very individual and lacks political direction. It looks like fun and very pretty. Wish the revolution would come about by just vibing in Portugal, but you know that we won't. Yeah, I don't think the revolution is going to come about by camping on land that you bought and not confronting capitalism at all. But I'm sure it is fun. Oops, all comments. Yeah. I remember seeing this one meme where it was a pic of some cells under a microscope. Caption was, how could they exist without any profit incentive? I think about Joe Rogan. He's incredibly privileged to have time to hunt for wild elk and eat farm to table and do cold exposure in lakes and streams and do wilderness excursions with friends, wear handmade clothing, basically the lifestyle of the majority of millions of pre-colonial indigenous Americans. Yeah, his multimillionaire status allows him to perform these things which give him that deep sense of rugged individual authenticity and to perform masculinity in particular ways like hunting and eating the primal flesh of the animal and like all this other stuff. It's a lifestyle. I mean, it's a lifestyle as commodity, and he can afford it. And yeah, you have to be, it's he is not a hunter gatherer. He is a very he's a product of this society, not a hunter gatherer society. As our population grows, the types of food we eat and their availability will change. Meats will become a luxury. I mean, meats have always been more expensive than other foods, and plant alternatives will become more commonly consumed. Yeah, so we're going after all the more controversial topics today. Vegetarianism, veganism. You need a little bit of knowledge about nutrition to know what you're doing. It's better for most people in the end, though. So yeah, most people eat way, way, way too many animal products. You don't actually need any meat to live. You don't need any animal products to live, though you do need to know what you're doing and be informed about your diet. But even if people were to cut down their animal products intake by half tomorrow, they'd be doing themselves a service. And yeah, absolutely. Now, even that, I mean, they're making cultured meat now. The price is plummeting. It's just cloned. And, no animal is raised in horrific conditions for months and months and, have a hole cut in their side like happens to the cows, while they're alive. And all the other stuff. There's none of the cruelty of the animal, meat industry, and they're just cloning some cells, and then they combine it with some fat cells and some structure cells, and it's that. I mean, and it also has none of the sort of microorganisms that it's like literally just pure those animal like muscle cells and stuff. So I don't even know if that is as healthy for you as like plant alternatives anyway. But even like meat per se, we're gonna soon be at the point where even like raising the animal, it will be less cost effective than just literally like brewing up some muscle cells in a vat, which they already do that in various things that the hell is the word that's escaping me, fermentation and why is the word, anyway, the word's escaping me, but there's plenty of stuff where culturing of cells occurs on vast scales, and the same can be done of meat now. I think they're doing the same with milk too, and the price is plummeting. So eventually it'll cross a point where it's less profitable to run a CAFO than to do that. I don't know when that will be, but yeah. But even then, it might still be healthier to eat plant protein than that. But yeah, you'll still get these people like the Rogans and whatever, like performing the hunting and stuff just to relish and savor that experience of like, oh, this is authentic. Why do you need to buy? This is what I guess there's something gnawing at me. I knew I had not said some part of the Rogan criticism. Why do you need to buy authenticity? It's because your whole life is fucking fake and you're alienated and you're a product of advanced capitalism. That's why you're trying to buy authenticity, because there's literally nothing real about your life. Okay. We can fix this in socialism, but, again, it's a product of capitalist alienation. You can't believe I haven't seen Castaway. Yeah, I tend not to go for those big sort of, those sort of like massive budgets. It's like if the movies that like everybody and their mother has seen, I tend to skip those. I don't feel like those are made for me. So All right, I gotta go in a couple of minutes, so I'm surprised some anarchist hasn't created a knockoff Anarchism for All channel yet. Um, that would involve reading, so that's all I can really say about that. I'm listening to your audiobook on Hoja, wrecking Cardelli and Tito at the moment. Yeah, that was pretty rough, but fair. That was in my Understanding Richard Wolff playlist as well. I did kind of a section on Richard Wolff in the summer of 2021 or late spring. I wish more people knew how inefficient it is to farm livestock. You put 6 calories into a cow and get back 1. That's assuming that everything is used very efficiently. Yeah, plus 300 gallons of water. It's insane. If we ate the food that we fed to the cows, much, much, much more efficient. Absolutely. But people are still living with this like 20th century mindset. It's completely outdated. Um, Religion causes religious trauma. Big issue is a health analysis on it. Yeah, religiosity is also tends to be linked to negative social indicators of all kinds. Not just cars, but the fact that they continue to get bigger and bigger. Well, I would say and less efficient. Ford is selling enormous trucks that should be commercial vehicles. And again, it's like if you don't have the biggest truck, then you're not the biggest man. And this is all like really interwoven with the American mythology, gender performance, all kinds of stuff. These conservatives would be loath to admit it, but without these consumer products, they will experience massive gender dysphoria. I feel like there was a backtrack in the early mid 2000s, and now hardly anyone ever talks about it. Hummers still exist. Shows how effective anti-green lobbying is. I think also just 2008 happened, and people started like fearing for survival, and a lot of these finer points got lost. I agree. I remember when a lot of people were criticizing this more, but that was like it was the early mid 2000s. It was like the real entrance of SUVs on a very wide scale. And there was backlash. People were like, what the fuck do you need this gigantic boat for? But it's like, yeah, why hasn't the gas efficiency improved in like a century? And it's just, there's so many things like that between the planned obsolescence. It's because oil companies run this country. That's why. The thing we do here in the US that I hate the most in urban development is box stores in suburbs. Huge waste of land and space. Amen to that. Yeah, I think planned obsolescence is roughly as old as capitalism. As soon as somebody realized, hey, I can sell somebody 2 of these, and with mass production, it became easier to produce 2 of them. It was just a matter of time before, like, the motivation is inherent there. Grass lawns are an incredible ecological disaster. No pollinators touch the stuff, basically. Yeah, I mean, because grass is rarely allowed to grow to the point where it's going to flower. So, yeah. Huge water suck, and it's cut short so it dries faster. It's literally a chore. European invasive species expected to be manicured by barely paid workers in the case of golf courses and lawns. It's awful. Yes. Again, if you're anti-lawn, read permaculture stuff. It's going to liberate you. Kill the lawn, plant native plants. Your local park district can give you seeds for free. State and Revolution is what really convinced me about Marxism-Leninism. Such a good book and still relevant today. Thank you for getting me into sweet potatoes and yams again. I forgot how much less expensive it is to make food from scratch. Absolutely. Absolutely. So another comment. Only a year into being vegan, but I'm much healthier. Way lower blood pressure, and my skin even cleared up from cutting out dairy. Yeah. Many, many, many people do not handle dairy well. It's amazing. Like, you're having various problems. Try cutting out dairy for a month or 2. You might be surprised. Many people have all kinds of problems. Clear up from cutting out dairy. Off topic, but I was watching Luna Oy last night at work. She was describing how they're planning the genocide against trans people, and it makes sense. They're trying to make it possible to punish sex crimes by death and make homosexuality and being trans a sex crime. That will get resistance. Meanwhile, on their side, they're trying to lower the age of consent. Yeah, that's the double standard. Conservatives are trying to, like, do child marriages and shit like that. Lauren Boebert's 18-year-old son got a 14-year-old girl pregnant, and she's bragging about it. This is not progress. I don't know what else to say. Yeah, I agree. I didn't see that stream, though. Also trying to reduce meat and dairy intake with new Mediterranean diet. Yeah, so the so-called Mediterranean diet, it's like, yeah, I mean, you can look it up. There's a lot written about it. It is different from the sort of red meat heavy, U.S. type diet. And apparently it is connected with many health benefits. I think you can still, kind of go further than that. But yeah, that is something that people in the U.S. are so unhealthy. There's so much chronic disease, and so much of it comes from the way that we eat. And so much of the way that we eat comes from having no time to cook, or what is there's so many things. There's so many things, but hamburgers not really that good for you. Yeah, this is kind of what I was saying about Rogan. Even if we were able to create meat more profitably, reactionaries would tie it into manhood and then charge more for, quote, real meat for real men or something like that. Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of what he's already doing. It's like, oh, I ate the elk. It was full of, it got my T levels up. Like whatever kind of fucking bullshit. Yeah, good, decent point. Honestly, from Hakeem's interview with Richard Wolff and Vosh, we should have known that he wouldn't be able to hold the anti-revisionist line on the deprogram. Well, let's see. But I agree, there were some pretty significant flaws in both of those that I mentioned at the time. Any pro-lawn stuff I see in here makes me think of Hank Hill. Well, I was talking to some MAGA communists, and they were like, Hank Hill is actually the face of American Revolution. No, that would be Taylism. Taylism is that amazing innovation that allows you to just label whatever the most backward segments of the working class think as revolutionary, and then you don't have to engage in ideological struggle or education, because literally, it's already all revolutionary. Well, no, it isn't. This is, of course, complete nonsense. Poor people who cook have better health outcomes than wealthy people who don't. According to Michael Pollan, author of The Omnivore's Dilemma, writes a lot about sort of food history and food politics. That is a really, I'm going to end on that. That's a really key qualification. Poor people who cook, meaning you are poor, so what are you buying? Cheap staples, whole grains, roots, beans, nuts, things like that. But not a lot of meat, not a lot of packaged stuff, or less anyway. And making your own thing, less of the preservatives. Maybe you're using herbs and spices, which and also controlling the amount of salt in your dishes. Things that herbs and spices often have anti-inflammatory or other kinds of health promoting effects, depending on what it is. Poor people who cook having better health outcomes than wealthy people who don't. I think that's great. Yeah, and then there's the whole topic of dandelions are edible too. It's a shame they're considered nothing but a weed. Yeah, dandelions, the entire plant is edible, root, leaf, and flower, and not so much the seed. But well, I don't know if the seed itself, but definitely that fluffy part is not. But dandelion wine out of the flowers when that's flowering, or you can just put them in salad. The root is edible. The root can also be dried and used as a tea. Some people do. It's a similar plant to chicory. Has a taproot like that too. Chicory was for a long time used as a coffee substitute, and same thing. But yeah, they're very nutritious. Also, one of the most nutritious plants, nettles. So this kind of like opens the whole topic of foraging, and more of like wild plants that you can eat, but which are not really grown commercially so much. And there's a ton. If we do get around to the Cooking with S4A series at some point, then we'll definitely get into foraging. Imagine if I picked my own lawn and ingested it. Well, and anybody talking about foraging can tell you this, but you do have to be careful about sources. So, like, you don't want to eat stuff right next to a road. It needs to be a certain distance back. Otherwise, it's going to have various pollutants that settle into the soil and get picked up by the plants sometimes and things like that. So you do have to be careful about the source of it. But yeah, there's tons of plants all around you that are edible and nutritious, and sometimes have other benefits. All right. Well, anyway, we'll leave it there for today. That was kind of I feel like it took 2 hours for the stream to start getting focused on something. I'm not really sure why that is, but I feel like, I don't know, everybody was, including me, I don't know, was a little bit sluggish early in the stream, and then it got better for me, at least, in that last third of it. But we're going to leave it there. Thanks to everybody who showed up and helped to make the chat what it is, and everybody listening after the fact on YouTube. Thanks again to the patrons and other people who suggest stories and other things. All of it's appreciated, and we'll see you in the next video.